Hi, my friends. Thanks for joining us today as we journey through the Bible together, one day at a time, Genesis to Revelation in 1 year. I'm Tim, your good friend and Bible teacher. Today's reading was in Psalm 40 to 45, and I'll share with you a few thoughts from Psalm 42, which seems to go together with Psalm 43 today. But a number of years ago, I was preaching at a church in Nevada, and I was there for a week. And one afternoon, I had a chance to get away and did some exploring up in the desert, as I am wont to do in that situation. And I noticed that off in the distance there was a small cluster of utility trucks. And so I found a path that was headed in that direction. I took it. And as I got closer to this group, I was even more curious because clearly labeled on each of the trucks was the fact that these were all from the city of Los Angeles. And I got to wondering, what are they doing out there? Why would trucks from the city of Los Angeles be out there in the middle of the desert in Nevada? You want to know what they were doing out there? They're looking for water. Because you see, my friends, when people are lacking in water, they have a tendency to get desperate. And that's part of what's behind the story of Psalm 42. It's labeled as one of the Psalms was for the sons of Korah. There are 12 Psalms that are labeled in that way. The story actually begins in Numbers chapter 16 with a rebellion. It was started by a man named Korah, and some other people joined him in rebelling against the leadership of Moses. And as a result, this whole group perished there in the desert because of their rebellion. But as you keep reading in Numbers chapter 26, it tells us that Korah also had children who did not participate in this rebellion, and they did not die. And their descendants became gatekeepers in Solomon's temple. 1 Chronicles 26:19. And one of them was apparently the hero in this psalm, who was taken hostage during one of the many raids on Jerusalem and the temple. And there in this faraway place, he was lonely, longing for home. But do you know what he missed the most? It wasn't the smell of fragrant challah bread from his mother's kitchen. It wasn't the lambs on the hillsides of his father's farm, or friends, or family. What he missed the most was God. Where was God at a time like this? How could he even pray when surrounded by mocking captors? And yet, how could he not pray at a time like this? And that's why he writes in verse 1, "As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. My soul thirsteth for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God?" He was desperate without God. He was as desperate as this young deer with no water, would do anything to find a drink. That's how he felt about God. He locks on to the fact that he serves a living God in verse 2. Not like the pagans who served dead idols who couldn't hear or see or respond. Oh no, his God was not dead. It was alive. And he was there. He was at work. Even when we can't sense him, he's still there. And this Levite understood that. He was alone without God. And that's why he writes in verse 3, "My tears have been my meat day and night, while they continually say unto me, Where is thy God?" When I remember these things, I pour out my soul in me. For I had gone with the multitude. I went with them to the house of God, to the voice of joy and praise with a multitude that kept holy day. So this young man, he responds to the present exile by just remembering the past when he had enjoyed going into God's presence and favor there in the temple. He remembers some of those pilgrimages when he praised God in the midst of the congregation, pouring out his soul as a part of that grief, and that's what he remembers. He remembers the fellowship that he used to have in verse 4 when he said, "I used to go with a multitude." As people would travel up to Jerusalem for holidays. They would go together in groups. And it was a joyful time, and they'd be singing and praising God together and maybe have testimonies of what God had done for them, prayers that had been answered. As they walked and sang together on their way to the temple. And that was all in the past, though. And that's why there's this spiritual loneliness in the heart of this Levite that could only be filled with God. And the same thing is true for anyone, my friends. Without God, you're hungry for God. You're thirsty for God. You're desperate without Him. I want to ask you something today. Have you ever gone through a time in your life when God seems distant? Have you ever gone through spiritual dry times? You're not the only one. Other believers have gone through the same thing, like this Levite that we read about here in this psalm. But you're not alone. I want you to know that fortunately, there is hope. Wherever you are, whatever your situation is, God is still there. He's right there with you. He hears, He sees, He'll respond. We'll keep reading, my friends. Our reading for tomorrow is in Psalm 46 to 51. And dig into those great Psalms, and I'll look forward to being with you again. Then have a great day, folks.